Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nick. I'm from GovTech. Today I will share about how Apex enables a more integrated government. Uh, Apex is a centrally managed API platform for whole of government of Singapore to use. We are part of this SG Tech stack. And Apex mission is to enable our government, business, and developers to connect, innovate, and unlock the full potential of their apps and services. And how we do that? First, we create a unified platform, and this platform will be available for uh, government agencies to publish and share their APIs and data. And then we will enable developers to discover these APIs to gain access to the data and API products so that they don't have to rebuild anything that is already available and shorten their time to market. Of course, we don't build the APIs for the sake of it. The end outcome is to improve the lives of our citizens and businesses when they interact with the government, right? Apex today has about 38 agencies publishing and more than 40 agencies on board. We publish about 3,000 APIs and handle about 150 million requests a month. Apex started from on-prem, and back then we were only supporting G2G APIs. Obviously, we needed to move to cloud as part of the modernization, and as we moved to cloud, there was an opportunity for us to actually to also work with businesses who are consuming government APIs, and therefore Apex started to support G2B APIs when we moved to Apex Cloud. From when Apex was on-prem, um, it was a very publisher centric, right? Each publisher will have their own kind of instance, and if you want to consume an API from this publisher, the publisher will create an application for you, and then kind of give you the API key. And when you have issues, when the consumer has issues, the publisher usually plays the role of the person that's debugging for them and managing from it. In this kind of setup, sometimes a single project will have multiple apps in multiple projects. When we migrated to Apex Cloud, the we have pivoted away from this kind of setup. We migrate each application into their own project. So now consumers will be their own independent entity on Apex, right? Say for example, project A is maybe one of the agency A, and app one belongs to agency B, and app two belongs to agency C, and then now we migrate them to into each individual projects on Apex Cloud. What this means is that now all regardless of we no longer distinguish between publishers and consumers. And as long as you're a tenant on Apex Cloud, you will be able to publish and consume APIs. And with this, we actually hope to foster a better culture of sharing and APIs and data. Now, when two agencies wants to integrate via APIs, there's a few things that they need to find out and do, right? Who owns maintain the API gateway? Which API authentication to use? How do we manage the API access? How do you rotate the keys, your certifications, your credentials, and how often do we do that? How to manage the user access for both the publisher and the consumer? And how do you authenticate your users? And for government, right, we also have the intranet network, right? And what happens if one system is on internet and the other is on the intranet? Now, Apex helps government agencies solve this. With Apex, we have a centrally managed platform with 99.9% availability. We do set out guidelines on API authentication based on the sensitivity of the use case. And we have a self-service portal, and this allows the publisher to grant access to the consumer, and the consumer can then rotate their keys when they need to, and they can consume the API. Go ahead and consume the API. There's also a self-service portal for user management and administration. This is actually quite common for long tech projects where people come and go. There's a need for you to keep updating the number of users you have who has still have access to it. And Apex also comes out of the box with cross-zone functionality. This means that you can publish an API on the intranet and then consume it from the internet, and vice versa. Now I'll start to share some of the use case that Apex supports today. Like I said, today we have a few agencies that are publishing APIs, for example, ICA, and the Live SG app that Singapore citizens will be familiar with retrieves birth cert and death cert data from ICA APIs. And MOM has an exit permit system that also retrieves vaccination service statuses from ICA in order for them to process the exit permit for migrant workers. Another kind of impactful use case is paramedics uh, uh, will go through Apex in order to first retrieve the patient clinical records, high level of course, and also to pre-register the patient on to the hospital that they are going to. This is so to enable the patient to be onboarded, check in quickly into the hospital, and receive treatment. And like mentioned before, we have start to work with businesses for G2P APIs. Right. Today, businesses needs to submit a lot of regulatory information to government. Right. And like for example, employment income needs to submit to IRA, CPF contributions to CPF, and things like that. Usually, business and citizens view the government as a single entity, and they don't like to work with multiple different government agencies. Um, so what we did was to work with the HR SaaS provider to integrate to APIs from these three agencies, right? Because all this information are already inside the SaaS system, and instead of manually extracting from the SaaS system and then uploading to each of the agency portal, we integrated with the HR system and use OAuth, basically a consent-based flow, to allow business owners to submit their regulatory information seamlessly into these three agencies, right? And this will enable uh, 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 more accurate submission and more timely submission. So today we cannot have a talk without talking about AI. AI is coming fast and furious, and how Apex has two key ways how we help agencies work on their AI development. First, uh, we have the cross-zone functionalities. This allows systems on the intranet to be able to reach out to resources on the internet to in order to do their API development. And for AI development, uh, there's a lot of data that is required from multiple different agencies. And Apex supports this by already having like maybe half the agencies on board already, and you can easily work with another government agencies on Apex to share data, or even offer your own data, and that will allow agency to embark on their AI development quicker. So, uh, do you think that CPF or ICA or any agency will be able to build their own API gateway? Actually, the answer is yes. All these agencies would be able to build their own and manage their own API platform if they wanted to. But is this what we wanted to focus on? We actually think that CPF would be better off focusing on helping us with our retirement plans, and ICA can protect our borders, and therefore let us handle the API management part, right? Because API management is not just about the gateway. It's also about you also need to maintain the gateway. You need to do your issue and rotate your credentials. You need to have a place where to publish your documentation, and also for your consumers to read the documentation. You need to manage the users, both the consumers and the publishers. You need to manage your access control. There's a need to maintain playground and sandboxes so that you can help your consumers learn how to consume the API on their own self-service. And you need to manage the subscriptions, the approvals, and of course, another important part is to do the reporting and of your APIs to know how many transactions are being executed by which API and how many are being consumed by which other organization. You also need to do debugging when you face an issue, and you also need to monitor the uptime of the APIs. Also, you will need to manage the rate limits and throttling, and also the versioning of the API is also important. And of course, lastly, this the cross zone uh, feature that we talk about. So we don't want agencies to 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 be burdened by all this, right? We want them to quickly be able to integrate via APIs and focus on the business case that they are good in. And this is what Apex does. We basically offer a full API lifecycle management for our agencies and help them very quickly come on board within a day to start publishing and consuming APIs on Apex. So now I will hand over to my colleague Alan, who is our lead DevOps engineer, to share about some of the technical details under the hood for Apex.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everyone. Alan here from GovTech. I'm the lead DevOps engineer in Apex. I will speak about our journey of moving our on-premise infrastructure used to host our API gateway over to the cloud. As you can see over in this diagram here, our on-premise infrastructure on the left relies on manual switch in the event of a DR, commonly known as disaster recovery. During peacetime, data from the primary data center is replicated over to the secondary data center asynchronously. For the cloud setup, we relied on the availability zones within the cloud provider to achieve the high availability we need. This slide talks about how different the two setups are. For on-premise, we relied on proprietary inbound authentication, relying on app ID and app secret for less sensitive APIs, and app ID and certificates for more sensitive APIs. When we moved to the cloud, we decided it is easier to simply use API keys for less sensitive APIs to reduce the friction of API consumers to consume an API, and for sensitive APIs, we take a more secure approach. Although it takes more time to set up and troubleshoot, there is less maintenance overheads as compared to the previous setup, where they are more complex to rotate the certificates as compared to API keys. On top of that, we offer user consent flow, which our previous setup does not have. This is to support our collaborative effort with IRAS on the one-stop payroll initiative, which my product manager Nick has just shared. We refresh our API gateway into the cloud from on-premise. As before, we supported staging and production environments as well as internet and intranet cross-zone bridging. In the cloud, we expanded our scope to support government to businesses use cases. API monitoring and analytics are also open to our tenants for self-service. Our developer portal authentication used to be local, and we made use of TechPass for government users and CodePass for business users. For context, TechPass is one of our government IAM solution. The payload size limit has increased from 2.5 megabytes previously to 10 megabytes. Our previous maintenance downtime is also reduced from 6 hours of full downtime into 2 hours of disruptive downtime. This has helped to boost our service level of agreement to our tenants on the availability to our tenants. As mentioned earlier, We open up our observability dashboards to our tenants to facilitate self-service. The dashboard here shows many different business matrices like success rates, top 20 API requests, transaction history, etc. This provides our tenants a quick oversight of what their top consuming APIs are, down to the individual methods within each API. The slide shows part of the panel in a dashboard we open up to our tenants to facilitate API debugging. In this screenshot, you can filter out for basic information such as timestamp, status code, and URI, etc. This will help you quickly identify an API that you want to further troubleshoot on. We keep this data for 1 year. Moving on, the next panel within the same dashboard. Once you identify the API from basic logs just now, you can use its unique correlation ID or metadata to further filter in for detailed logs, which will contain detailed information such as the headers received by our API gateway from the client, as well as the headers sent back to the client from our API gateway. Something our team consciously wants to avoid is to lock the payload of our tenants. Otherwise, we have to comply with certain data regulatories, in turn, which will drive our costs up even further. And this data we keep for 1 month. For certain cases where headers are not sufficient to determine the root cause of a problematic API, we have also included trace or debug logs to help identify what is the error thrown by our API gateway. Some examples that we managed to identify using the trace logs include identifying whether an application has no access to a certain API and knowing if a backend server certificate is not matching. Common issues we see are wrong certificates uploaded for the API, or it could be the case that the leaf certificate on the backend server expired. Being an API gateway provider, naturally our consumers or customers are interested in knowing how much latency we add to their API. The panel here shows the duration of each hop, including an estimate of how much latency our API gateway adds into the API call itself. We have 2 networks in the government, internet and intranet. This panel is to help our tenants quickly identify the second unique correlation ID when traffic is passed from one gateway to the other. In doing so, it reduces the time our tenants have to take to trace down the second API call when it is breached from one zone to the other. Do you know how many APIs you have in your API gateway? This dashboard actually helps our API gateway and API consumers and providers to have a quick overview of success rates of their API over a period of time. The left pane identifies whether an API call has failed because of the consumer, and the right pane identifies whether an API call has failed because of the provider. This can help an API provider or consumer quickly identify whether an issue has occurred in their backend server, or is it the case the consumer is not calling the API correctly. How we determine this is based on the HTTP response code in our API gateway logs. HTTP 400 series of response code usually indicates a problem with the client calling the API, and HTTP 500 series typically means there is a problem on the backend server. This is our survey results for the past 5 years. As you can see, there is a dip in 2023. The reason for the dip is due to our API migration journey to the cloud. We believe this is due to the disruptive change we had introduced during our migration journey. Some of them include changes in the inbound authentication method, which I shared just now, which will mean our API consumers will have to rewrite their code in order to work with our new API gateway that runs in the cloud. Efforts are also required of our API publishers to test their API in the new API gateway to make sure the API is functioning as expected. That said, you can see that the satisfaction score increased over the past 2 years and even beyond the score we had when we were running our API gateway on-premise. The results provided reassurance to our team that the journey to the cloud was worth it. And with that, we conclude our presentation. Thank you.